At the base of this waterfall is River Dhiba.
I remember seeing the Aberdare forest on fire. Bonfires everywhere in the forest. So what was happening? The forest was being tamed. They were clearing indigenous forests to replace those indigenous forests with exotic plantations of pines and eucalyptus.
Eucalyptus generally consumes a lot of water.
Fish swam in it. Residents drank from it. The vegetables around it were evergreen as the soils were moist. 30 years later, however, this is nothing but a story for the residents to tell. Currently, the water levels have subsided. There are no fish. The moist soil has been reduced to dry rocks. Residents can barely have enough water to fetch for their daily use. Yes, climate change is to blame, but more so, the growth of Menywa Mai, as residents call it in their native language, referring to the eucalyptus tree. Up this river is retired Bishop Pamius Mushina's homestead. The 67-year-old man has farmed the eucalyptus tree from 1962. The eucalyptus tree he planted reduced soil erosion at the riverbanks and provided a roof over his head. Little did he know that the trees were a blessing in disguise.
Hapo beleni tulikuwa tukiambiwa tupande Menywa Mai huko sababu inasoea ile mchanga kuteremka chini, na tukapanda. Tulikuwa tukihusia wale watu wa mbao, kukatakata mbao, na wale wengine ile ingine ni ya kujenga. Tunapasua tunajenga nyumba nayo. Mbegu ya kwanza ilikuwa ikipatikana na tabu sana, sababu mahali ilikuwa iko ni huko juu kwa msitu.
Mushina's eucalyptus tree is covered an average of 1 acres of land, marking the end of the hill.
Hapa beleni nilikuwa nimepanda kiasi kama eka moja, sababu ni kupanda na muto huko chini.
The eucalyptus tree is a fast-growing evergreen tree native to Australia. The tree boasts of an average height of 90 meters with a circumference of 7.5 meters. Furthermore, the tree is a valuable source of timber, fuel wood, paper, and nectar.
So in Kenya, the eucalyptus trees came to us at around 1900 when we were building the Kenya-Uganda railway. And during that time, they required a lot of fuel wood to power the engines, the railway, the train engines from maybe Mombasa to Kisumu. And that is when they were introduced. However, over time, the eucalyptus trees have gradually been used in different ways. For example, it's a main source of firewood for our water industries, for schools, for the tea industry, the tobacco industry, brick making, and many other uses. It is also used in transmission lines. Kenya Power, for example, we see a lot of the same. It is now a major supplier or a source of timber, and we see that it's a major source of poles and even construction materials, furniture, and what have you. So literally you can see that it has a wide range of uses.
The eucalyptus tree takes an average of 4 years to grow, depending on the species. Also known as the blue gum, the tree is dependent on pollinators, grows rapidly, establishes easily, with no natural enemies in its adventive range. So, is eucalyptus tree more of a problem and not a solution to climate change trend?
It has been observed that where you plant eucalyptus, and we have agricultural crops like maize in particular, the performance of these crops generally is much lower. Sometimes you get no yields, depending on the distance from the crop to the tree. The trees, we have seen in literature, for about 20 meters, the eucalyptus would affect the maize. in one way or another, more so in performance. The reasons are these. One, eucalyptus is a very deep-rooted plant, and by so being, it is able to tap moisture from deep down the soil or life zone. And therefore, a maize plant which has very shallow root system finds that the surface area generally is dry, and therefore there is no moisture for the tree, for the crop to grow. And therefore, eucalyptus generally consumes a lot of water. And that's why it's able to put on a lot of biomass within a relatively short time. However, eucalyptus is such a good tree in terms of conversion of that water into biomass, that meat, that wood. So in terms of conversion efficiency, eucalyptus ranks very highly, it's very efficient. Another reason why the yields go low, as it grows fast, it takes up nutrients. So generally, you find that where eucalyptus is growing, then there are certain nutrients, for example, phosphorus, calcium, total nitrogen, and even soil moisture levels, these will go low.
In 2002, first green species Eucalyptus grandis and Eucalyptus camaldulensis had been introduced to Kenya from South Africa and planted in great numbers everywhere.
Hata elimu ilikuwa imekuja hapa hapo mbeleni wakati wa ile mtaalamu anaitwa Mishuki alikuwa akitaka ing'olewe, lakini hata wakati alisema hivyo walijaribu kung'oa afisa chivu na mashivu mpaka hiyo kazi ikaachiliwa. Minyuma ikaendelea tu kuwa iko kwa mto.
Concerns were raised in Kenya about the high water consumption of eucalyptus tree, but clearly the directive fell on deaf ears.
The study revealed that the best areas to plant eucalyptus are marginal lands degraded through soil erosion, and on areas with saline soils, and on farm lands as plantation and woodlots.
Yeah, we may not have very clear registrations, but we now see counties, each county, especially you see Kisii County, Nyamira County, and at times back way Murang'a County, coming out with the registration that we should not grow eucalyptus along riverbanks. In some other areas, we should totally not grow eucalyptus and start thinking of other species like bamboo or other alternative species. And earlier on, during the regime of President Moi, we had a commission that was dealing with environment, soil and water conservation. At that time, they also came up with some kind of policy that we should not grow eucalyptus, more so in water catchment areas. And during that time, this was effected, and at the county levels, I know Kisii County, they have tried to effect the same, and as well as Nyamira County. So you see, it does not appear like a national policy on the same or legislation. Each county seems like they are thinking that there is something we need to do, but possibly not very sure, because what they need to do should be guided by science.
Echoing this was the Kenyan Nobel Peace Prize laureate, the late Professor Wangari Maathai. In 2011, she called for a ban on commercial eucalyptus tree plantations in the country on the grounds that their high rate of water demand was contributing to the depletion of water.
With the coming of the colonial administration, a completely new chapter gets into the country where we begin what we can call development. And development for us meant clearing the bush. The typical hut of an African doesn't require the very tall eucalyptus, but the new houses that were being built in the new colony required these kind of trees. But what we did not know then, of course, was that this was we were destroying our catchment areas, our water catchment areas. We were literally burning into ashes our beautiful biodiversity of animals, of plants, of birds.
Particularly, the Professor Wangai Maathai late championed for greening the environment. And therefore, we have even a foundation she came up with, and we have seen a very active foundation working on greening the environment. And therefore, if you go to some areas of central Kenya, you go to Nyeri, where, for example, we have 38% forest cover. A lot of this is through her effort, where there was massive mobilization of communities, groups, women groups, youth groups to plant trees, start nurseries, and we see that impact. And even today, we appreciate, and you know, she was honored as a Nobel Prize winner because of her activism, not really activism, but promotion and mobilizing communities to plant trees. On Eucalyptus, this is a critical area because Moranga and Nyeri, these are areas of central Kenya where when you walk around, you don't see much of it, meaning therefore the promotion was on other indigenous species and graveria with minimal planting of eucalyptus. However, with the time we see the tree being rolled out because the communities have also realized it is an important tree because it grows fast, brings money quickly, and it also has many uses. One, we as a research institution have done a lot of research not only on eucalyptus, but many other different tree species. Most important and critically, the information that farmers should be able to get is what we call species site matching. Which species for which site? However, because sometimes of lack of this kind of information, our farmers and communities and stakeholders grow the wrong tree in the wrong place, let me use that. And therefore, while we are provided, and we've been brought a booklet for you to see more of the science of eucalyptus and its effect on water sources, on soil fertility and related, we find that there are farmers or communities where you find eucalyptus is being grown in water catchment areas, in swamps, wetland areas, where it should not be, yes. Around rivers, around springs, and sometimes leading even to drying of these springs. So the most important information that we have done research on, and we have it already packaged, is species site matching. And specifically for eucalyptus, we are saying there are certain areas where it is a no-go zone. A no-go zone are swamp areas, wetlands, water catchment areas, around springs and such like. That's what we are saying.
Again, people still grew the blue gum tree. Kenya is not the only one dancing to the effects of planting the eucalyptus. Kirby documented a research that reads, the invasive eucalyptus species in South Africa is responsible for the loss of 16% of the 1,444 million cubic meters of water resources lost to invasive plants every year.
Iko tofauti kubwa sababu maji ilikuwa mingi sana wakati huo wa mbeleni, hata maji ilikuwa juu, lakini wakati huu maji inawachwa kidogo. Hata wakati jua inaendelea sana, maji inakuwa kidogo sana kama mferezi kidogo. Lakini wakati wa hapo mbeleni, wakati tulianza kulima, maji ilikuwa mingi sana, hata ilikuwa juu na ilikuwa mingi. Lakini wakati huu ni kidogo kabisa. Inaharibu sababu maji inakuwa kidogo, hata wakati tunataka ikuje juu itusaidie iweze kupatikana, inakataa kunja sababu maji ni kidogo huko kwa mto. Hapo mbeleni tulikuwa tukipanda na ikakunja ikawa mzuri sana. Na lakini wakati huu kama unapanda iwezi kuwa mzuri sababu maji ni kidogo. Inaendelea kumalizika maji kwa mto. Unapata maji kidogo, hiyo mimea ikaharibika sababu hata jua ni kali, jua inaendelea kuwa kali sana sababu hiyo miti kunaonekana maji ikiwa kidogo, hata jua inaendelea kuwaka zaidi.
Mushina is not the only one living by the proverb, when you choose an action, you also choose the consequence of the action. His neighbor Elias Mugo is also reading from the same script with an emphasis on soil degradation. Now, when the blue gum shades off the leaves, they fall on the forest floor. The allelopathic chemicals released from the roots, leaves and branches act as a natural herbicide, clearing the ground beneath them. No wonder the patches on the ground, also known as the Swiss cheese effect.
Na nianza kulima kama 1968 na nimelima mahindi, beans na oranges, gadamia, kahawa, madisi na vitu vingine mingi. Na hiyo miti nilipanda kwa sababu kunakaa kama msitu. Na kibanda miti hata ikui mzuri kwa sababu ya soil. Lakini tunaweka tu kwa sababu ya factory, kama wanakuja kununua factory ya chai, wananunua kaenda kutengeneza chai. Na wengine kama wanaenda kufanya kama carpenter, wananunua na kujenga, tunajenga na hizo miti. Na inatusaidia tu kama vile tunaweza. Na kama wakati wa zamani tulikuwa napanda mahindi kama eka moja, ilikuwa natoka kama 30 to 35, lakini ziko hizi ukipanda hata iwezi fika 10 kwa sababu ya soil. Oranges tulikuwa napanda, lakini ilikuwa mingi hapa. Oranges ilikuwa napanda, tunapeleka huko akina Ngurubani tunauza, lakini ziko hizi hata ukipanda hakula haiwezi kuwa kwa sababu soil iliharibika kwa sababu ya fertilizer na kulima kila wakati kwa sababu hauna wakati wa kupumzika. Ikaharibika, hata uwezi kupanda miti mingi. Mandisi tunapanda, lakini hata hayo inaanza kuharibika.
And underneath eucalyptus, we find we have literally almost a clean area without other plants, such that it affects biodiversity. The reason why it does so, one, is because there is something called allelopathy. Allelopathy is that there are certain chemicals that the root systems of eucalyptus will produce, and when the leaves of eucalyptus decompose, they also release these chemicals which inhibit the germination and the general growth of other plants. And that's why. And therefore we are recommending that eucalyptus is not a good agroforestry tree to grow with maize or beans, okay? We may have to have a woodlot for where it is on its own. We may go further to plant it in certain areas like hilltops where it does not compete. And if you have big land like the farmers in Eldoret, then while you grow your wheat, your maize, you still get some land where you can grow eucalyptus separately from other agricultural crops.
Hata wakati maji hiyo inatakikana itusaidie hapa nyumbani, inakataa kuingia sawasawa kwa miferezi, sababu maji ni kidogo. Hata wakati wa kutoa inalete tabu, wakati wa kutoa na mferezi, wakati wa kuchimba ile mtaro ya kulete ili kusaidie kulima, haiwezekani sababu maji inaisha. Hata ikiendelea kuteremka huko Mwea ni karibu ikose ya kulima mchele. Kunaonekana hata kulima mchele ikawa shinda.
Residents are having mixed reactions on abandoning planting eucalyptus and substituting with other plants such as napier. Others have joined the bandwagon, while others, it is the money for them.
Tunajaribu, lakini watu wanasema hakuna njia ingine ya kufanya pasipo tu ni kuendelea na kupanda hiyo minyoma, sababu inajenga manyumba. Hata sasa ina bei, ukipanda ukikata unapata pesa, lakini ukimaliza uko kutakaa namna hiyo na uwezi kupata kitu. Hata ile mchanga itateremka yote iende na maji. Ndio watu wanaendelea kupanda.
Wajua, kama unasema waambiwe wacha hii, panda hii. Na kama uwezi bewa kitu ya kupata kingine, si unakaa na ile uko nacho. Unaweza niambia hii shati yangu si mzuri, lakini kama sina otherwise sinakaa nayo tu. Ndio tunakaa kama hiyo miti tunaipanda kwa sababu hatupatiwe nyingine ile tunaweza tumia. Lakini tukipata nyingine kama saa hizi, hata naweza kata tu this week. Na mvua ikinyesha napanda ile miti nimeletea. Kina pesa tukolee hii miti hata kwa kikingi yote imalizike. Alafu tubada ile miti tunaletewa, tunaweza furahi sana. Hakuna mtu anaweza kataa, kwa sababu hiyo miti ni mbaya, ina hasara mingi. Ni kama vile mtu muna anakula chakula, kwa sababu na otherwise unakula tu ile unapata, na huwezi kukosa kukula, kwa sababu kama una chakula mzuri si unakula ile unapata. Na ndio tunakana hiyo mti ni mbaya, lakini tunajua iko na hasara mingi, lakini kama hatuna otherwise tunaitumia tu vile tunaona, kwa sababu tumeipata.
We cannot say there was misinformation. A tree is a tree, and the forest cover will increase as we plant more trees or tree cover. One, from time immemorial, even during our grandfather's time, they had trees and they planted trees. As of that time, we never talked of 10% forest cover. It was not there. It's a more recent introduction with climate change especially. And therefore, the people are well informed. The people have their own trees and they are planted, and they have all sorts of reasons. They are planted for fruits, for food, for timber, for poles, for fodder, for medicine, and they have continued to plant. However, the growing of eucalyptus, and it was even there before we started talking about 10% forest cover, is that people see the economic value, that indeed the tree grows fast, it's able to give them money into their pockets for livelihoods within a relatively short time. And therefore, it is possible that in certain parts of the country, like Kisii, Vihiga, Kiambu, Vihiga, Nandi, Kericho, people have that as almost the only tree on the landscape. And there's a lot of disadvantages having that kind of monoculture, one single tree, because if we have an outbreak of a pest or some disease, it can sweep away that. So we need to bring in other tree species to improve on biodiversity, and we have already made recommendations of the trees we can grow, for example, in Kisii, Grevillea. I've talked of Kakamega, Mysopsis emini, Prunus africana, Macamia. We can also bring in even fruit trees like avocados, mangoes. All these should be brought on the landscape so that if you're not getting an income from your tree, the fruits can supply you, the medicinal plant, the fodder. So these trees are already recommended for each agroecological zones. Yeah, we did not misinform the public. Okay. People plant, and let me say this, farmers are very rational. Whatever decision they make on their land use, they have looked at many options.
This feature has been brought to you courtesy of One IFRA Africa Media Grants, Climate Change and Environmental Reporting. Marion Munyao, KTN Farmers TV.